And welcome back. It's time to talk politics. We are joined with our two newest Talk Business and Politics contributors, Dustin McDaniel, former Arkansas AG, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, former campaign manager for Governor Mike Huckabee. You're a senior advisor to the Trump campaign now.
Yes, sir.
What does that mean?
Well, this week it means doing a lot of media and taking a few hits here and there.
Gotcha.
But for the most part, it's focusing on overall strategy, message development, and making sure first we get the magic 1237, and then moving on from there, ideally beating Hillary Clinton and taking the White House.
See, she's already got Hillary Clinton pegged. You're a Democratic National Committee man as well for the Arkansas Democratic Party, and you're a superdelegate.
I am a superdelegate, and I think that even without the superdelegates, at this point, Secretary Clinton has a lead somewhere roughly 3 times the maximum lead that Senator Obama had at the height of the '08 campaign. I'm not saying it's mathematically impossible for things to change, but it is extraordinarily improbable.
Well, I want to come back to presidential politics, which we will dive into, but let's begin first with the ethics brouhaha that Dustin McDaniel has a little bit of responsibility in exposing here. You wrote a very interesting opinion article for us about basically the dismissal of this ethics complaint against Attorney General Leslie Rutledge and Treasurer Milligan here. The key to it was that they were both campaigning for a federal candidate. Explain to us why that definition of candidate is so important to this decision.
So in 1969, the Arkansas legislature passed a statute that I would bet was personally driven in some way or another to punish someone who'd been involved in a campaign. And this act says very harshly, with no exceptions, anyone that dedicates any of their time during their office's regular working hours for another candidate, not themselves running for re-election, then they have to be removed from office, deemed to be guilty of malfeasance, subject to a year in jail and a $1,000 fine. And that's clearly been ignored for 50 years because it's a ridiculous law, and I think that elected officials have universally believed that it's one thing to say that hourly employees have to take leave or vacation before they engage in political activity. That makes perfect sense. We all agree with that. But elected officials, you don't get to take leave. You don't get vacation. You know, if the governor has to get up at 3 in the morning and go deal with a tornado, he doesn't get time off, and he doesn't get overtime, and by the same token, he shouldn't have to take leave to go to lunch at Doe's. All of that is the way it's worked in practicality for many years, and now all of a sudden, there's a real question as to if you're a federal candidate, the Ethics Commission says the law doesn't apply, but if you're a state candidate, that's still up in the air. They haven't said yet what they're going to do, but it's clear we have a ridiculous law that you can't really enforce because you'd have to remove the entire government, but at the same time you don't really want to ignore either. We have a law that needs to be repealed, basically, and that's what they've exposed.
Yeah, and so this will play out in the Ethics Commission in the upcoming few weeks because there's been a complaint filed to deal with that.
And I agree with Dustin. I mean, it's extremely hard to enforce something like this, and but now that it's exposed, I think it's time to get rid of it and move forward. And otherwise, we're going to get a very big refresh across state politics, which I don't think anybody's quite ready for. Of course, there are a couple people I'd love to see go, but not the entire slate.
Are we going to name names?
No, not today.
Okay,
We got to save something for
good.
next time.
I mean, I applaud the governor for they recognize that this is not a laughing matter. We're laughing about it because the results of enforcement would be so ridiculous. It just simply needs to be addressed for the future because we don't need to subject our elected officials, Republicans or Democrats, to trying to go through some creative hoops to avoid some draconian law that shouldn't be on the books to begin with.
This story really is centered about the Ethics Commission ruling and the fact that it is a near preposterous interpretation to have to implement.
Well, what happened was the Ethics Commission was presented with a number of defenses on behalf of the Treasurer and the Attorney General, defenses with which I generally agree, that they have a constitutional right to free speech, a constitutional right to free assembly, that there's no rational basis for the arbitrary nature of this thing, and there's no practical way to obey it because they can't take leave or vacation. And basically the Ethics Commission sidestepped all of those defenses and said, well, it doesn't apply because it's for federal candidates and that John Bozeman isn't really a candidate. Well, that's silly.
Right.
John Bozeman is a candidate. He's just a federal candidate. We need to, as the governor said, make this apply evenly for state and federal.
All right, let's go presidential politics. Donald Trump had a rough week this week. You took quite a few shots, I noticed, in some things were going on. There was the abortion gaffe. There was the campaign manager charged with battery. Polling suggests Wisconsin may be a little dicey. Was this week a momentum killer for Donald Trump?
I don't think it's a momentum killer. I definitely can't argue that it was a great week for Donald Trump. But at the same time, I mean, things like Wisconsin, I don't think are that big of a deal, which I'm going to talk about here in a little bit. But Wisconsin for Donald Trump isn't a must-win state. And I think it's one of the last places that you're going to see Ted Cruz actually do well. And after that, you move into the Northeast, where I think Donald Trump's going to do extremely well from there. Right. So while Wisconsin may not be the best state for him, I don't think it's going to matter in the long run.
Democrats' reaction to Donald Trump's bad week, rough week?
First of all, it would be really entertaining if it weren't so serious. And I think that Wisconsin is going to be a rough evening for Mr. Trump. But what's also rough is that all of the anyone but Trump forces that have poured so much money into trying to stop him are about to have some real buyer's remorse, because if they look up and get what they want, they're the dog that caught the car and they're stuck with Ted Cruz. Either way, I don't believe that the Republicans are likely at this point to nominate a presidential candidate that's going to resonate and carry an electoral college map. They're going to do really well in certain pockets, but I think that they are really putting Secretary Clinton on a path for victory. And I was listening to Senator Cotton earlier, and I respect his talking points, but there is zero chance that Secretary Clinton is going to be indicted or in any way legally disqualified from taking the oath January the 20th.
I was going to give you a chance to address that. So, Sarah, I'll give
Even
you a
if
chance
she's
to rebut
not
there.
legally disqualified, I still don't think she'll be sworn in as the next president
Why
of
is
the
that?
United States. I just don't think she has what it takes to win over the American people. I think they're tired of business as usual, and I think that's why we're seeing somebody like Donald Trump do so well this cycle. There's nobody that is more that fits the definition of a Washington insider than Hillary Clinton. And time again, we've seen over this cycle and even the last cycle, the electorate move and looking for an outsider that's going to come in and shake things up. And there's certainly no argument from anybody that could be made that Donald Trump can't come in and be the guy that shakes it up.
30-second rebuttal.
Donald Trump shakes things up, but he shakes things up the same way you would if you took a box of your grandmother's china and threw it off the roof of a building. It is not what we want to see in our presidential politics, and I don't think ultimately that the GOP will allow him to be the nominee. But how do they stop him?
Yeah. All right, we got to take a break there. Well, actually, we got to end because the show's coming to an end. But we're going to take our conversation online if y'all stick around for a few minutes. Okay,
Absolutely.
We're going to make some political predictions, and we're also going to talk about a few other issues here with Dustin McDaniel and Sarah Huckabee Sanders. Thank you so much for watching us this morning. We appreciate you very much. You can catch our online conversation at talkbusiness.net right after the show goes off the air, so please do that. Until next week, have a busy and a productive one. I'm ROBY Brock. We'll see you then. All right, welcome back to our Web Extra. Our political roundtable continues with Sarah Huckabee Sanders and Dustin McDaniel. All right, there's been a couple other interesting things that may have happened this week. I'm going to give you guys a chance to throw your own topics out there. Dustin, I'm going to come to you first.
I think we're going to see a lot of discussion coming up about the unprecedented move towards politicizing the Arkansas Supreme Court. We saw a justice actually take the end of the table at a legislative committee and advocate for a significant policy change right down to campaign finance. That's way beyond the traditional role of a Supreme Court justice. Notably, the Chief Justice-elect has been left out of a new
Kind of task force.
Notably, the Chief Justice currently is left out of this task force, and one has to wonder if they have set it up in such a way that the Freedom of Information Act is being taken into consideration and when they're going to meet and how they're going to conduct their business, because each one of them is being paid roughly $200,000 a year in state money to now set up some task force that's never existed before. That's going to be a really interesting thing.
Yeah, I don't know enough to be able to defend or argue one side of the issue on that.
I'm not suggesting that it's wrong. I'm not suggesting.
Is it a bad thing for the Supreme Court justices to voice some more opinion on what's going on with the judiciary?
No, of course not. I mean, no one knows more about running for the Supreme Court than a Supreme Court justice, and no one knows more about how it differs state to state appointment versus elections than a Supreme Court justice that has presumably networked with his or her colleagues around the United States. It is new for Arkansas to see a justice step out of the judicial interpretation of the law role and go to the activist policy advocate role. That is simply, I'm not saying it's wrong, or I'm not even disagreeing necessarily with the policy, but it is something that I think is going to draw a lot of attention and discussion going forward.
All right, Sarah, I'm going to give you a chance. You got a topic you want to bring to the table here?
I think one of the interesting things, a little bit of insider baseball that we're seeing, particularly on the Republican side this time, is whether or not the voters versus kind of the establishment crowd and the party rules makers, what role they're going to play moving forward after this election, and how that shakes up, whether or not one candidate gets to the magic 1237 before the convention, and if they get close enough, what happens, what rules change. I think we're going to see a lot of infighting within the Republican Party, even more so than we already have as we move closer and closer to the convention. So.
I was in Texarkana earlier this week with your father, who was a speaker at a roast and toast for Representative Prissy Hickerson, a former highway commissioner, and Highway Commissioner Jonathan Barnett was there too. He is on the Rules Committee of the Republican National Committee. He's going to be right in the middle of all this, and I think he's a Trump delegate, isn't he?
He is.
Oh, how did you swing that?
Hey, you know, we can't tell everything here in public setting.
Who appointed him to the Highway Commission?
Dustin, I don't know. Who could that have been?
I don't know. I couldn't remember. It's just a history question.
Just a history
so
question.
a lot of fun there. All right, so we will watch that unfold, and he and I talked about that, so I do think that's a very interesting, ahead of Cleveland, going to be very, very interesting. All right, let's make some political predictions here before we go off online here. I'll start first if you want, or do you guys?
Sure, you go ahead.
I'll go first here.
Your show, we'll let you be first this time.
I think with legislators under the dome next week for a health care special session, we are going to see some new conversations emerge on a potential highway plan alternative to what the governor has proposed out there. Because they'll be there and they're going to be talking about it. I think there's already some rumblings of some things that they want to do. Watch for highway debate this next week during the health care debate.
Interesting.
State prediction, I think that the governor and Michael Lamoureux, as chief of staff, have probably got a little tighter rein on the votes in this special session than they're letting on. I think they're doing a good job of managing expectations, so when they go in there and make it look easy, people will think that it's miraculous. Certainly, I hope that's the way that's going to work out. Nationally, I think that the front runners both have a rough run of things in Wisconsin, and then it's on to New York, where I think that Bernie Sanders really gets the mathematical wake-up call that he can't avoid.
All right, Sarah, last prediction
Dustin
for you.
stole a little bit of my thunder on that one. I think in regards to Wisconsin, like he said, I think both front runners will struggle a little bit there. I think they'll both come away with some delegates, but may not win it outright. But I think moving forward, it becomes very hard for anybody outside of Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton to become their party's nominee.
All right, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, Dustin McDaniel, always good to have y'all, and looking forward to more working with y'all in the future.
Great to be with you.
Thanks, Roby.
That is all for our Web Extra. Thank you so much for tuning in. You can keep up with the latest business and political news each and every day at talkbusiness.net. We hope you will. Thanks for joining us.